Hello, I am Dr. Douglas Pietersma, and this is 10-Minute Home Education Seminars, Episode 3. 10-Minute Home Education Seminars are short summaries of various seminars that I have previously given or others that I intend to give in the future. The primary topic of these seminars is homeschooling, but they may also include broader topics such as discipleship, family, Christian living, and Christian education in general. Many of these seminar topics will have an accompanying article or a resource list. I will place the links for these in the comments when I post a video. The value of these written articles lies mostly in the reference sections, which will allow you to dig into the resources that I used when developing these seminars. Today's seminar is about a topic that every homeschool family has needed to address at one point or another. Nearly every study on homeschooling mentions or focuses on this topic, as well as being mentioned in practically every book that I have ever read that deals with homeschooling. If you have been in or around homeschooling for any length of time, the topic has probably already come to mind. It is the myth that will not die: the socialization of homeschool children. Those from outside the homeschooling community might ask those of us from within, how do your children get socialized? Prospective homeschoolers wonder, how will my children learn to interact with others? Critics of homeschooling argue that homeschooling will breed socially dysfunctional citizens, and they propose questions about how this can be avoided. Even though many of these questions are asked with complete sincerity, there are underlying presuppositions in the questions about socialization, even if those asking the questions are unconscious of these assumptions. I would like to address two of these before discussing anecdotal and scholarly evidence. First, to question the socialization that happens in homeschool is to presume the superiority of socialization that happens in institutionalized schooling. In other words, it is to say that age-segregated peer group socialization is the norm, if not the gold standard, of social development. A quick glance into statistics on bullying, sexual assault, or substance abuse in schools is enough to dispel this underlying presumption. But I will also provide scholarly research in a rebuttal to this argument later in the seminar. Second, to question the socialization that happens in homeschooling is to presume that parents either do not know how or are unwilling to provide their children with the necessary social development. Research has shown that parents who choose to bear the full mantle of responsibility of educating their children are concurrently and equally intent on developing character in their children, including socially appropriate behavior. In times past, when individuals would bring up the socialization of homeschool children, whether discussing my children or other homeschool children to whom I provide co-curricular educational opportunities, I would go on the defensive. I would list a myriad of activities and ways in which homeschool children can and do interact with others socially. This list is actually quite impressive. Homeschoolers in general are known for getting together for educational activities such as parent-led cooperative classes or coordinated field trips. Often homeschool families get together simply to be together at a point in time, which may be called a park play day or a lunchtime meetup. Other activities such as skating, swimming, bowling, or even organized sports are available to homeschoolers in many areas. Civics and industry organizations such as Future Farmers of America, 4-H, or Civil Air Patrol are regularly utilized by homeschoolers. Finally, faith-based activities, which are not usually limited to homeschoolers at all, are a huge factor. These events include, but are not limited to, youth groups, Bible camps, and Sunday schools. Even now that COVID-19 has changed how many of these activities occur, homeschoolers have persisted in finding ways to make necessary social connections. To use my children as anecdotal evidence, they are involved in homeschool classes with other homeschool students both online and in person. They participate in homeschool activities and field trips. They are active in church youth groups, Sunday school, and other faith-based events. Finally, they both have active leadership roles in martial arts classes, which doubles as an entrepreneurial education because this is part of our home-based business. My personal experience interacting with homeschool students and homeschool families bears out the generalized, albeit anecdotal evidence. Homeschoolers, by and large, are well socialized, civically engaged, and generally willing to interact with others regardless of age differences, academic attainment, or social economic status. Now, this is not to claim that there are no shy homeschoolers, but to use a few students, comparable in percentage to those attending institutionalized schools who might be considered shy, is a red herring argument at best. Now, having said all that, I do not feel as if any of it ever needs to be said again, because I know that what I've just listed is not, by any means, all-inclusive or exhaustive. When I feel myself being tempted to be defensive about this issue, I try graciously to lay the burden of proof on the inquisitor. For instance, I might ask, what is it about socialization in institutionalized schools that is desirable for my children? To be honest, most people have not even considered how socialization at school could be detrimental. But it does not take long for most people to admit that there are things going on inside the walls of schools to which most parents would object. A follow-on question that I might ask is, don't children need to learn how to interact with people, both younger and older, people of different academic levels, people of different mental capacities, in order to be prepared for life after high school? This question rarely draws a reasoned response, so I'll usually finish with something about how homeschoolers' interactions with others tend to be broader and more representative of how adults interact in day-to-day situations. I have found that most conversations about socialization do not last past the first question or two once the burden of proof is laid at the feet of those who might propose socialization as a downside of homeschooling, even if they are unaware of the underlying bias towards institutional school socialization. Being in educational research, I know that anecdotal evidence should never be the basis from which to draw firm conclusions. Fortunately, there is much justification in the scholarly literature to support the assessment that socialization is not a detrimental factor in homeschooling. Dr. Christy Anderson concluded that most homeschool students develop more advanced social skills simply because they have watched their parents and experienced for themselves firsthand interactions with people of all ages. Dr. Stephen Duvall demonstrated empirically that homeschool and traditional school students belong to approximately the same number of organizations, socialized equally as often with relatives and friends, and attended extrafamilial social activities with the same frequency. For Christian homeschool families, Dr. Don Schanzenbach determined that homeschool students learn social skills from adults as they participate with both adults and peers in social activities centered around church and family. Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute provided evidence to counter the socialization myth by relating that many homeschool parents have indicated to him that they must often consciously force themselves to avoid the lure of getting over-involved in outside activities so they can achieve the objectives they have for their homeschooling. Israel Wayne, a noted expert on homeschooling, highlighted that parents can choose social contexts that will be more positive. Homeschool children often interact with other children in homeschool groups, church, and other community and family settings. Most homeschoolers are far from isolated, he said. Lyndon Hawkins succinctly concluded, homeschool children, on average, are socialized and educated by parents to a much higher level than can be achieved in a government-controlled school. John Taylor Gatto, a 3-decade veteran of public school teaching, challenges the preconceived notion that institutional school socialization is ideal in his work, dumbing us down the hidden curriculum of compulsory schooling. In contrast to the institutional school age-segregated environment, Dr. Anderson determined that it is a false presupposition that healthy socialization only occurs at school. Throughout history, proper socialization occurred in an age-integrated environment. The downside of an age-segregated socialization paradigm is echoed by Burkhardt and O'Keefe, and they describe it as the most unnatural social construct imaginable. These days, most children suffer from a lack of contact with people who are their own age, they said. Dr. Schanzenbach concluded, students educated in school often develop all sorts of social problems due to their having been at the school itself. Numerous authors turn the socialization myth upside down, as I did in my anecdotal argument above. Donald Erickson said prevailing youth socialization may actually be the best reason for letting parents arrange their own youth socialization systems. Dr. Schanzenbach bluntly asserted the idea that children will be properly socialized by placing them in a large group of their peers is misguided foolishness. Israel Wayne goes further by highlighting the negative impacts of peer group socialization, which corrupts good moral character, and he proclaimed that far from being a reason to choose government schooling, the socialization question should be one of the primary reasons we choose homeschooling for our children. The fact of the matter is, institutional schooling changed the historical model of socialization, and over time it became the accepted default standard. Dr. William Cox stated that historically the family was the single most fundamental unit of socialization and cultural transmission in early America. The home was the central place for the child to learn business and work ethic. Homeschooling as we know it today is simply an integrated part of home life for most homeschool families, and so it seems that the historical basis for socialization is revived in modern homeschooling. In the middle 19th century, at the inception of common schools, or what we call today public schools, it was assumed by proponents such as Horace Mann that these institutions would have such a positive social impact that 9/10 of the crimes in the penal code would be rendered obsolete. Considering news and research on school violence, including bullying and sexual assault, it is clear that, as an agent for positive social change, public schooling has failed. Multiple studies back up this assertion that institutionalized education does not produce desirable socialization. As I conclude, I could hope that this is the last time I ever have to address this topic of homeschooling socialization, but sadly, I know that it is not. Veteran homeschoolers will almost certainly echo these conclusions, and if you have doubts, I challenge you to engage with homeschooling families to find out for yourself, as well as digging into the literature on the topic. This seminar has an accompanying article which will list the sources I quoted today so that you can access these references at your pleasure. I will include a link to this article when I post this video. The next topic I intend to cover in 10-minute home education seminar is overcoming obstacles in homeschooling. If you would like to contact me about a topic for these seminars, or if you are interested in scheduling me to speak at a conference, convention, or your church, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be included as part of the post or placed in the comments when I share the link for this video. If you are interested in courses offered through Ultimate Homeschool Auxiliary, please see the links which will be provided along with my contact information. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I pray that God would bless your homeschooling effort to the end that your children might grow to be dedicated followers of Christ and effective ambassadors for His kingdom.